I'm wide awake. Yeah, I was in the dark. Something, I'm wide awake. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, the podcast where Matt and Todd see a movie in the theaters, or we watch a Netflix movie, and then we talk about it, discuss it, share our feelings about it, and then we just kick it over to the internet, and hopefully you enjoy it, the listener. I am Todd Domer.
And I'm Matt Malloy, and yes, welcome to another episode here where we're going to talk about a movie, since it's a podcast about movies. And today, for the I guess it's technically the second time ever, we have a special guest joining us. Eden Cummins, our friend, is joining us on the podcast. She watched the movie with us, so say hello.
Hello!
And there she is. So, so we'll have a 3-person review today.
Boom.
Which will be very interesting, I'm sure, for all of you listeners. So the movie we watched is a Netflix movie. It is called Awake. And it has several people in it, most of whom you've never heard of before.
It's fair.
The main star is called Gina Rodriguez. She plays Jill. No last name. And she's famous for being on Jane the Virgin, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's...
And the movie Annihilation.
Annihilation, right. But not Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Not Mortal Kombat, yeah.
Just Annihilation.
The Natalie Portman Annihilation.
Right. And a person that I think is famous, Jennifer Jason Leigh, is also in this movie in like a secondary role. But that's about it, I think, for famous people. Do you have any
I would agree. No.
disputes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then...
Iron Fist was in the movie, but I don't know. I don't think he's particularly well-liked, so
Okay.
I don't know if he's famous or not.
Right. Well, you don't have to be well-liked to be famous. I mean, Hitler...
That's fair.
Hitler is a famous guy, but not well-liked by most people. Okay, so what is this movie Awake about? Well, the movie is... the premise of the movie is that there is some event that happens. Maybe it's a solar flare, maybe it's a cosmic ray. They don't really explain it too much. But something happens and all electronics on Earth stop working. And also people can't sleep anymore. So... The problem with this is that, well, we rely on electronics and also we rely on sleeping. So that's kind of a big deal. So the movie is basically people descending into madness and paranoia as they don't sleep for days and days. And making a story out of this that's more than I just said is the fact that there are maybe a couple people who do sleep, including the main character Jill's daughter,
Matilda,
who sleeps just fine, and no one knows why. We do learn why by the end of the movie, but. I won't tell you that because that would be a spoiler.
That's for them to discover.
That's right. So you go through the movie and kind of the processes. People are trying to figure out what's going on. Jill is trying to alternately keep her daughter away from this like secure facility where they want to study her and bring her to the secure facility where they want to study her. She kind of changed her mind a couple times, and anyway, they end up at the secure facility. But, and then, we get to the end of the movie and try and figure out, we learn what the cause, we don't learn the cause, we learn what the cure for the sleeping problem is, but also that probably very few people are going to get the cure. And that's, I think, where I'll leave things with a plot summary. Yeah. So, Todd, what did you think of Awake?
Well, I really wish we watched a better movie for our first three-person podcast. So, this movie, to me, definitely falls into the category of a very interesting idea for a movie that I was like, once we started to get into it, I was like, okay, this is very interesting. I'm on board. And then execution, everything just kind of falls apart to me pretty fast. Between the acting that's kind of like, yeah, and story that they introduce and then not even follow themselves, like, it's a jumbled mess. It really makes you think that they, like, didn't have a complete script when they started the movie. And they were, like, contradicting themselves as the movie kept going along and stuff like that. Like, we're told very fast into the movie that here's what happens if you don't have sleep, and these effects are accelerated because of whatever's happening. They're going 2 to 3 times faster. And then after day one, we see people in a specific, like, church setting really falling into madness and stuff like that. And then that kind of cuts out. And then it's like 5 or 4 days later, and then we see people fall into madness again. And it's like, you kind of set the terms for your movie, but then you don't follow your own rules, and that's a big negative for me. So I think when you have an interesting plot for a movie, everything's got to be tight around that to make the movie good. And this movie is not tight. So I would classify it as not good, in my opinion. And since we got 3 people tonight, I'm not going to ramble on. But I'm going to say, should you watch it, you could probably skip this one. Unless you're really into sleep deprivation and what that does to people. Then, you're off to the races with this movie. So, in conclusion, probably you can skip this one. I kind of wish that we had... But here we are. Matt?
Here we are indeed.
What did you think about this movie?
Well, I tend to agree with you on this one, Todd. This wasn't good. Wasn't really good. But like you, I did think that the story premise was pretty interesting. It's like, hey, we've got people who can sleep. Very few. We've got people who can't sleep. Everyone else. Let's figure out what's going on. Maybe it's a medical drama. Maybe it's I don't know. But could be interesting. But it was really too disjointed in both acting and storytelling to fall into that good category. There's characters who appear in the movie. Dodge, the character Dodge, who appears. And, is playing along with the main characters for a while, and then near the end, just kind of gets killed. And it's not really clear that he did that happened to him. He was kind of a major character, or at least a major minor character. And then you don't know really whether he's dead or not, but it turns out he is.
I thought there were no spoilers.
That's not a huge spoiler. Well, anyway.
Matt likes to push the envelope here. Take it to the brink.
I don't know these rules.
Yeah. Well, I don't consider what happened to him a spoiler. It's just kind of part of the main flow.
Except for the fact it happens at the end of the movie.
Well, it does. All right. If it's a spoiler, I'm sorry to our audience. Anyway, so I didn't like this movie, and I would say the most interesting scene in the movie was when apparently satellites were falling down through the atmosphere. I thought it was a nice, pretty, serene scene. There are a couple other interesting camera shots in this, but that was probably my happiest moment in watching this movie.
It's pretty early on.
that part. So yeah, I would say, like you said, Todd, unless you're really into sleep deprivation, you can probably skip this Netflix movie. And that's where I'll leave it. Eden, what have you to say about this film?
So I don't watch movies nearly as often as you guys do, so I had a different experience of not really having too much of a problem with it. It wasn't so laughably bad that I felt the need to just mock it relentlessly while we were watching it. I was engaged enough in the story. I think there were a lot of interesting elements that I just think it suffers from so many people, so many things occupy the same space, right? There are other versions of parents trying to take care of their kids in a wilderness setting movies, and it just didn't hit top tier of that. There are so many other mystery medical dramas, and it just didn't hit top tier of that. There are so many other post-apocalyptic what's going on movies, and it just didn't hit the top tier of that. It had all of these things where I think if there was less competition, it could have come together as something a little bit more enjoyable. But we've seen all these elements and we've seen them done better. I don't think that the acting on our lead, Jill, was bad at all. I think that she had some really intense facial expressions and some really layered moments of performance, and she went back and forth in the mania a lot more than a lot of the other characters did. I think for me the biggest plot thing that was a drawback was just how inconsistent the sleep deprivation was. It didn't really seem... It went from the church scene that Todd mentioned to a couple shots of people being weird, and then full blown at the end, just a huge ramp up, and there was not a lot of this tiered thing that we're told in the beginning is how this would go down. And so I think it also just left a few more questions than I would have liked at the end. It comes in at you very much like a layered mystery story, and then doesn't fill you with answers by the end, and doesn't even kind of give you conclusions to the stories and questions that it asked of itself. And I think that those were my problems with it. But overall, I enjoyed myself. I had a lovely time tonight. It was a good, enjoyable thing. I will probably not think about it tomorrow, but it was, a perfectly fine way to spend an evening.
Fair. All right. So, Matt and Eden, how would you rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 5? We're going to say 0 to 5. 0 to 5 mothers shooting at their sons. In this case, 5 being the best.
Yes.
And 0 being the worst.
Arguably, he had the worst performance in the film, so...
Yeah. He deserved it, is what we're saying.
Yes. So yeah, there is a scene that takes place in a library of all places where Jill is trying to train her daughter, who she thinks is going to be one of the only survivors on Earth, in how to shoot a gun. The daughter doesn't want to shoot the gun, so Jill shoots the gun, and apparently her son is right behind the bookcase that she's shooting at. But, she had sleep deprivation, so there's some reason to it.
It does lead to, I think, my favorite line in the movie, which is, just don't shoot at me again, okay? Just mildly disappointed and concerned.
Right.
Did you just shoot at me?
Well, so on a scale of 0 to 5 mothers shooting at their sons, I'm going to give this a 2.1 out of 5. Below average, too much choppiness in the story for me, but there was some potential there. And, Eden, you hit on something. I didn't have a bad time watching this movie. There are certainly movies that we've reviewed where it was not an enjoyable time watching the movie. So
Also, I think it helped that this wasn't in the theater. Like, we were able to talk and joke through it and stuff like that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
heightened the experience and all that kind of stuff.
No, this
If
would have been.
If this was
in
in the theater, yeah, I would have been like, oh, why? Why did I sit through this movie?
right. So 2.1 for me.
2.1.
Eden, what did you think? What is your rating like?
2046.
2.046.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
what I'm gonna go with.
Fair.
I think it unlocked a lot of doors for me, and then closed them immediately. It kind of like wanted to be one thing, and then just didn't quite get there. I think that I enjoyed myself, but like I will never think about it again. I would not recommend it. I think the most attachment I will have to it is my name being on this podcast where we reviewed it.
Fair enough.
Nice. I think I'm going to be at a 1.8 is where I'm at. I think I get pretty disappointed when a movie presents a very interesting premise and then just cannot follow through on it. Like, and I feel like this movie, it didn't totally fail on following through with its premise, but it just, like, the potential for something really good was there, and so it all just seems squandered to me. So, 1.8. That's where I'm at.
Wasted idea ruined the movie for Todd. Well, that is going to wrap up our podcast where we reviewed the movie Awake with our special guest, Eden Cummins. And using the magic of technology, I have calculated that our average rating is 1.982 mothers shooting at their sons out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good rating, really. It's fairly below average. But, you know, if you feel like watching something and that comes up, you can watch it. If you don't. Yeah.
You gotta do you.
You gotta. Well, thank you, listeners, for listening to our podcast. Please keep listening. We'll keep making them. And we will see you next time.
Da 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 da
Da da
da da da.
da da da.